各位，长期研究和平和国际关系的学者杨奥伯格，他在演讲中指出，中美关系的困境并不只是在经济或者是军事竞赛，而是西方社会在体制和思维方式上的根本局限。他们或许能帮我们理解，为什么西方社会似乎永远需要一个敌人，如果没有，他们甚至会创造一个。
What is undermined very, very clearly now is pluralist open media and our democracy in the West, because everything is now geared to warfare and militarism. More. There's nobody who stops to think. There's nobody who stops to think about the long-term consequences of pouring in weapons and never solving the conflicts. You just look at what goes on now in Israel. The country that has so much weaponry already, had nuclear weapons, have had a special agreement with weapons with the United States, $5 billion a year, I don't know for how many years. What is the first reaction in Washington? We must transfer even more weapons to Israel. This is a sick society. It's a sick way of thinking. And of course, this whole thing has to do with, as I said before, the dream, the unrealistic dream or illusion that if we can get rid of Russia as an opponent, and we have created that opponent ourselves because they have never invaded a NATO country, they hope that they can concentrate all NATO's resources on a Cold War or, God forbid, a hot war against China. You just go to NATO's homepage and you look at the threat perception. NATO is now characterized to be something like a church. You either believe in this nonsense or you don't. There's never an argument on NATO's homepage. The text is, China is a threat or a challenge because China is different from us. China has different interests from us in the West. Now, if that's how you define a threat, everybody around the world basically is a threat. So the whole thing is a military-industrial complex lives from finding enemies, because if you don't have enemies, or say you have enemies, or appoint somebody, or make enemies, you can't legitimate your own arms development, and the military-industrial media academic complex will fall apart. So that's why the moment we get rid of that military-industrial media academic complex, we can begin to talk to each other as human beings.
这一段话让人非常清晰，战争并非自然发生的，而是体制自我驱动的结果。敌人是需要模拟出来的，但是中国真的是美国无法回避的敌人吗？还是说有机会继续成为合伙的伙伴呢？
So the long story short here, I think, is that I wouldn't trust that the Americans are going to change much unless there is a people's revolution, non-violent, not the stupid thing that we saw on 6th of January 2 years ago. But if there is an uprising in the United States saying, no more militarism, we want a good society here, and we want cooperation with China and everybody else in the world. We need to cooperate to solve humanity's environmental problems, poverty problems, infrastructure problems, all these things. We're wasting every hour for humanity's and our children's future by militarism and warfare. Now, I know that China is the second largest military power on earth and it has nuclear weapons. I have a problem with that, but that's my problem. But the long story short is that China wants cooperation. It wants the Belt and Road Initiative. It wants a good relationship with the US. It maybe do things we don't like in the West, but it's not a reason to have a Cold War against it. It's a reason to talk with it. So therefore, these meetings are important, but we need much more dialogue in terms of online thinking. We need NGOs working together. We need cultural people working together. In parentheses, I'm also an art photographer and I'm trying to do an exhibition here in China about dialogue. And those types of things that can soften the hardliners, undermine the hardliners who want sooner or later a war. And if you ask me, Taiwan, it's very simple. It's China. It's China, and it's very clear in the communique between Zhou Enlai and Nixon. I think it's number 12. It's a very large document. It's very clearly saying the United States will not interfere in this issue. And so we have a one China policy. It does all the things it shouldn't do in Taiwan. And I have a huge problem with that. I'm not very popular saying that in the West. But if we keep on doing this, we can only hope that China will be patient enough for long enough for the United States to sink on its own in that destructive self-militarization. But I would wish, as somebody who has never hated the US and never been anti-US, or anti-American as they say, I'm a collector of American art, I work with American scholars every day, that the United States will come to its senses and begin to see itself as one partner of the world and not a dominator, an imperialist and militarist.
原来冲突不是必然的，选择合作还是对抗，其实在于美国是否愿意放下帝国的执念。中美关系的紧张并非是必然，而是体制、叙事、心态的选择。如果战争不是不可避免的，那我们需要更多这种温和的声音，提醒世界还有另外一条路。你们觉得中美之间有没有真正的和平呢？
I think it's possible. We still have this possibility of rising from below in the Western world and say enough is enough. I'm looking for democracy to work that way. I'm not looking for Biden or Trump. I don't think they will change the system. We need a system change in the West. But that is where they are. They need desperately to have enemies. And if you don't have enemies, and I don't see anything in China's foreign policy that is a threat to the United States. It is not China that has its vessels outside California's coast or Florida's coast. It is the West that has all its vessels around China. And the AUKUS cooperation with Australia, and the submarines that are there, and the Germans who are in your waters, the international waters around you too, and the Taiwan issue. I don't see China do these things to the West. Imagine, it's not completely comparable, but imagine that China was obsessed with arming Hawaii to become an independent state. I wonder how Washington would react to something like that. And therefore you invent your enemies. If you want enemies, it's easy to make it. You now have Russia, you have a large part of the African world, the global south, and you have China, that you declare don't follow us, are different from us, think differently, and therefore they are our enemies. This is very, very dangerous and very, very sad, because we could gain so much from working together. And I can still only hope that there will be somebody who comes to their senses, and it will not be Biden, and it will not be Trump, and change America from the inside. Because the moment America, with all its resources, creativity and ideas and history and knowledge, begin to become a partner in the world, not somebody who insists on dominating over everybody else, the world will be a much better place, and the United States will be a much better place. So I'm looking for a peaceful revolution where the Americans will rise and say, enough is enough with your empire and militarism. We want a good society here, and we want to be friends with the world. And you have the same question here in China with the opening up of Nixon and Chu Enlai's meeting via the connection of Chas Freeman and Kissinger, that the hope was that if we open up to China, we will achieve two things. One, we will see to it that China and Russia will not be ganging up against us. We'll split you. And secondly, we hope China will go our way, become a multi-party system with a capitalist economy, and be like us. This be like us is over. This be like us, become like us is over. And that's what the Americans cannot understand. They still believe that they have to lead, that the world must be led by the Americans. And the reason they can't see it and they are in denial is that it's going down. Not the US as a state or a society, but as an empire. And all empires go down. There's no empire that has existed forever. So you may say the United States today is Titanic. The West is sitting as restaurants in Titanic, and the water is coming up around the windows. Now, instead of then reaching out and say, okay, our time is over, we will be one among many and we will cooperate with you, what they do is they insist on one thing, and that is to dominate by means of deception, untruths, narratives, and secondly, militarism. I would like to predict at this occasion, the United States will go the same way as the Soviet Union, because it is militarizing itself to death. The Americans don't do diplomacy anymore. They send weapons. They pour in weapons because that's what they are best at. But no country can survive with just being strong in one sense, for instance, militarily. If you become politically weak, you become economically weak, you become psychologically weak, you become weak in terms of international law and legitimacy, then you are on your way down. A strong country is one which has high level on all power indicators and do not over-militarize and neglect the other power scale.
各位，在浩哥观察室这个频道，我会挑选全球最有影响力的学者观点，与大家一起理解他们的思考。在这里，你们能听到这些人生的答案。如果你真的想听懂世界格局，那就欢迎订阅，与我一起冷静观察大事，找到属于我们的思考角度。